Hey guys, number one Marmaduke fan here. I'm actually recording audio on my mic because when I love a comic so much, I don't want you checking out because the audio ducks out. So, Jane Eyre from Manga Classics, published by Udon. Highest recommendation. This is a perfect comic. This is the third installment I've read in the Manga Classic series from Udon. I've loved all three. This is the second one I've read from this team, Sun Neko Lee doing art and Crystal S. Chan doing the adaptation from the original book into the manga format. And this is this team's second perfect review in a row. They are doing yeoman's work for comics. Udon is doing God's work, literally and figuratively, for the comics industry. Buy all of these and get them in your library. Buy more copies and then give them to moms who don't like comic books and think that comic books are stupid. Give those moms a copy of this to give to their kids. If you know a kid who's struggling in their English lit class and they don't know what the heck's going on in the book, buy another copy and give it to that kid. Buy a copy and donate it to your library. Buy it just because you want something fun to read on the weekend. And that will stay on your library shelf forever, and you'll read it and reread it and reread it. These are perfect. Now, the last two I read in this series were The Scarlet Letter and Sense and Sensibility. Now, I've actually read the real book for The Scarlet Letter and Sense and Sensibility, so that was part of the reason why I loved these two comics so much, is I knew the source material. Spoiler: I have not read Jane Eyre, so that couches you got to put an asterisk by my review. I don't know how successful they are in capturing the spirit of the original Jane Eyre because I haven't read the original Jane Eyre, but I absolutely love this book. And what it did is it made me immediately want to go get Jane Eyre and start reading that right away. And even though I haven't read Jane Eyre, I can tell by the writing style. I can tell when someone is writing in a modern style of voice because the sentences sound more clipped. It sounds more conversational and down to earth. I can tell from the dialogue that, and actually from Crystal Chan's commentary on her writing style, that what they're doing is they're directly taking the original book, and then this is the important part. They are putting care and attention into making sure that it actually reads like a fun comic. So if all you did was Jane Eyre did this, and then Jane Eyre did this, and then Jane Eyre did this, and then Jane Eyre did this, it wouldn't work. It'd be boring, and it'd do the opposite of what it's supposed to do. You'd get bored, you'd say, I don't care about this isn't fun to read, and then you'd be left with a bad taste in your mouth for Jane Eyre. But Sun Neko Lee and Crystal Chan get the power of comics. They get what's the appeal of manga is. Therefore, they will make some slight changes. They will amend some things slightly, but they're doing it for the specific purpose of making this book more fun to read. And when Crystal Chan makes a change, she actually comments on what her changes are and why she made that change. And I get it. Yep, you did exactly what you needed to do. You made some slight abridgments as necessary to get it down into this format. And it actually did keep me engaged through the entire book. Whew. All right. So the problem with this book is it's so good. Look at this. These are all the bookmarks I marked of things I wanted to talk about. There's no way I'm going to be able to do that this video. So this is going to be your spoiler-free review. And then later I'll probably do a whole separate long video where I talk about all this good stuff. But one of the reasons why Udon is currently publishing the best adaptations possible of classic works of literature is this. It's long. It's 300 pages of comics. So, there was the Classics Illustrated series in the 1950s, the golden age of comics, and those were 24 pages, and you'd read about the Three Musketeers, it'd be a fun little adventure. Yeah, those were okay. And there was actually a completely separate company called Classics Illustrated in the 90s that would do 48-page prestige format books, and they hired really interesting artists to do those. So those are both fun, great classic, comic stories. I love both of those companies, but they do not hold a candle to what Udon is doing, because if this is 24 pages and this is 48 pages and this is 100 pages, 300 pages is enough space to let you tackle a serious author. Now, they still have to abridge huge chunks of stuff just to get it down to 300 pages of manga, but at the very least, they get a touch on some of the big themes of the story. And the thing about classic literature, especially Victorian literature, is there are often multiple themes on top of one another, and then your understanding of each of these themes gives you more perspective on all of the other themes. I don't know who said this, but a short story, you can't just take a short story and stretch a short story into 400 pages and have a novel. The novel has to have multiple themes, so you're continually staying engaged. I mean, think about any story or TV show where you checked out, where the plot was like, we gotta save the girl, and then, well, okay, we gotta save the girl. That's a great plot for a movie, but is it really like a 900 page plot? Are you going to stay invested in, we gotta save the girl for that long? So for Jane Eyre, the reason I marked so much stuff is it's reflecting on a really powerful and important theme. And it's doing this in multiple ways with multiple different characters with different personalities. And there's even like one little mention of Jane Eyre's art, where it's a really interesting point about art. And like that could be its own whole video, but it's just made kind of almost incidentally to illustrate something about Jane Eyre's character. And then it's back to like the same style of the rest of the plot. So they're almost like mic drops of really interesting little moments and ideas. And that their main point is to serve like, it's weaving a tapestry, a complex tapestry of this character. I've talked over and over again in my manga reviews about the importance of giving your characters agency, having them be responsible for their choices, having them make choices that matter. And not only does Jane Eyre have that, it's like the entire book is a reflection on what does it mean to have agency? What does it mean to be responsible? What does it mean to make the right decisions in life? And it's beautiful. So since I'm not going to talk about Jane Eyre in this review, I just want to talk about what a successful comic this is. I want to don't want to spoil the ending. Okay, fast forward to the end of the book. I'm going to cover up a spoiler here. So I just want you to hear the creative team and just sort of see the love they have for their craft, because that's the whole point. That's why this is a perfect comic, because they love their craft. So Sun Neko Lee writes, "Meow. Hi, hello everyone. I'm Sun Neko Lee. What do you think about this manga classics? I love it. Good job." Spoiler, I'm going to cover that up. Back in the day, people from different social classes rarely fell in love. Luckily, we now enjoy the freedom to love who we want, regardless of class status. So that's one of the many themes of this book. But yeah, they definitely like picked up on that. I like how they kind of talk to kids and sort of help kids, maybe like, you can't like do like an exhaustive essay on English culture, but they're kind of helping kids maybe wrap their minds around what was different about English culture. Notice the height difference between Jane and Mr. Rochester? I'll tell you a little secret. Our story adapter, Crystal S. Chan, and her husband share the same height discrepancy in real life. The characters' hairstyles are also referencing their hair in real life. Hee hee, they have so much fun. I enjoyed drawing the curly-haired characters in this adaptation. Which hairstyle do you like best? 19th century curlers. So this is actually just a quick little sketch. In the regular manga, she draws it with real precision and care and grace. It's a very sumptuous drawing style. Even in her little sketches, she still captures sort of the charm and appeal of this. Whichever kind of hair you prefer, I hope you all enjoyed my overall drawing style. Thank you for your support. She's doing, this is an authentic manga style that's doing exactly what it needs to do to bring you into the world. So something I want to talk about with reference to Sun Neko Lee's art style is, I think one point where kids, you're in the English class, you got to read the classics, and then it's just sort of like it bounces off you. You don't know what these characters are doing or what's going on or why it matters. Something that Sun Neko Lee is doing to help is she's using the conventions of manga art to kind of help communicate to you things about the character's personality. So if Mr. Rochester is being a little silly, she'll draw him with a silly face, and you'll be able to say, oh, okay, he's not being serious. And that sort of helps you understand the charm of the original, if the original book would be like bouncing off your head a bit because you don't have enough context to understand what's going on. This is now Crystal S. Chan's essay about adapting Jane Eyre. And I seriously think you could teach a college course using this as like a textbook example of the process of adapting an earlier work, where you have these two challenges, you got to make it fit in the new medium, and you hopefully aren't just like writing dumb fan fiction about Jane Eyre. Hopefully you're trying to capture something meaningful in the original about Jane Eyre. So I want to find like a couple juicy quotes. I'll discuss how this novel was adapted, a process that involved remaining true to the original text while taking advantages of some of the unique properties of manga to provide readers with new insight and enjoyment of the novel. That's what's important. That's what lets a kid who likes manga actually read this and actually enjoy this and not just dip out because they feel like this is a boring Cliff Notes way of like not reading the novel and cheating on your book report. This actually gets you invested in the characters. So she mentions that the original novel has first-person narration, and because of that, she can't use things like flashbacks if Jane Eyre doesn't know about it. So she respects Bronte enough to recognize that Bronte's giving Jane Eyre a first-person narrative voice for a reason that has to be retained in this. Even if we'd like to see a flashback to some side characters, that wouldn't fit. This is the bit she mentioned. Well, I think I mentioned this before, where she made some slight changes. So there's a tiny little, brief little subplot point where Jane Eyre wakes up and she sees that her curtain has been ripped. And what Crystal S. Chan explains is that this is not in the original novel, but because manga is written to be engaging and to keep you interested and curious about what happens next, she came up with this as a way of adding a little twisteroo at the end of a chapter to give you a hook to keep you reading to the next chapter. And actually, it does fit entirely within the plot of what's going on. So it's a example of a change where I understand the reason why she did it. While I was reading it, I did get engaged in this. I said, "Oh, I want to know what's going on." So I kept reading. It did exactly what she needed it to do. And this is an example of thinking about how to stay true to the dialogue while having to abridge it. So in the original, Jane Eyre meets Mr. Rochester, and the chapter ends when she discovers that the mysterious man she met on the road is actually Mr. Rochester, the owner of the house where she works. So Chan makes the comment that, well, that's not the most exciting little ending point for a chapter. So what she did was she went to a future chapter and took dialogue from their conversation and brought that into this chapter so that at their first meeting, they could have an interesting conversation. You could kind of see like the complex, intellectual, somewhat romantic relationship between them, even as they're just first meeting each other and first starting to talk to each other. So she's taking words directly from Charlotte Bronte to use as her template, but she's trying to, what is she doing? She is pushing some of these chapters together to squish them down into manga size chapters, which is what she needs to do to make it fun to read. It's perfect. She talks a little bit about, the artist loves cats, so she tries to give her an excuse to draw cats. Okay, Adele, I'll talk about Adele later because her design is important, but Adele is French, so when they have her speak in French, they put it in a dialogue balloon with two bubbles instead of one bubble, so you instantly know, okay, they're speaking in French. That's great. That's the comic. That's what comics need to be. They talk about how in like TV, an actor would have to portray, all of these characters, and you wouldn't be able to have like a character in disguise. I guess this is a minor spoiler, but there's a scene where Mr. Rochester disguises himself as a gypsy, and they explain that in a manga, you can get away with that a little better because you don't hear the actor's voice and say, "Oh, that's Mr. Rochester." Now, I actually guessed it was Mr. Rochester because of the way his eye was drawn, but they actually did a good job of kind of like obscuring the details of who he was. So you'd be genuinely surprised by that little revelation. And then they have their, like the little editorial comments on Charlotte Bronte and the publication of the book, some of the themes of the book. And this character design lineup is beautiful. This is, I think, Sun Neko Lee's strength is she considers costume, height, and the overall visual look of the characters in order to sort of represent what you need to know. Like if you were just reading the book and you're a kid and you're confused, like who are all these people? What's the difference between all of them? So what they're doing is they're giving you some visual language to understand some things. So Grace Poole is kind of a creepy, low-class girl, and she's a little unsettling. So how do they draw her? Well, they give her like these sort of sunken eyes, and they give her this spiky, wavy hairdo that in manga is usually like an evil ghost girl has this kind of hairdo, right? So they're using a visual cue that says something's off about this person, and that kind of helps establish her creepy look. Adele is a cute little French girl. She's very full of energy and life, maybe a little spoiled rotten. So she's got this wild, wavy hair. Mr. Rochester kind of has this wild, untamed personality. They mentioned that in the book he's actually supposed to have kind of wild hair. So he's got that wild hairdo. When Jane Eyre is young, she has wild and unkempt hair. When she's old and a bit more in self-control, she has a more beautiful bun. Secondary characters, all the secondary characters, they have to work out their costume, give them like different profiles, have them actually look like different people with different facial structures and different body types. Something where when Jane Eyre is in her wedding dress, she looks a foot taller than when she's in her normal dress because that makes it more grand and more spectacular to see like the big flowing waving wedding dress. So they get to do a little like departure from reality as needed to make a big, beautiful visual effect. I forget this guy's name, but the schoolmaster, he's kind of a very severe and strict personality, so he gets like this cuff that's going up against his neck to show he's kind of stuck up, and he's got like very severe straight lines in his wardrobe design, height differences to help you keep straight all the different characters, like costume differences. She's in a more puritanical outfit because she's very religious, and she wants to be a nun actually, so she gets a more reserved outfit. She's a more brusque personality. She marries for money, so she gets a bit more of a bodacious outfit. Costuming, faces, hairstyles, all of it is being used to help you mentally separate all the different characters, so you're not getting lost in all like the sets of characters. 15 minutes, that's it. Perfect comic. These are worth buying. These are worth spending your money on, keeping in your library forever. These are worth giving to people who don't know anything about comics and they don't understand the appeal of comics. Udon Entertainment with the Manga Classics series, these are 100 years from now. These comics will still deserve to be read. Quality, less. Excellent. Good job, you two. 2 perfect reviews in a row. I'm going to read everything from Udon's Manga Classics series. I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. Next, I will be trying to talk about all of this great stuff, but that's for another video. Like, comment, subscribe, click the bell to receive notifications. Send this to a teacher who is struggling to have her students read Jane Eyre. I love you guys. Catch you later.